Play the horses. You know, they either geld the horse with a knife or with the chemicals. And your daddy said no to me. I did him the chemical way. Gave your mother a taste. Put the hook into her. Ah, she doped up good and proper. Hung herself with a wire on Melnair Cass. And you, running around the neighborhood looking for her. Your daddy didn't have the heart to tell his son that he was looking for a suicide doper who was never coming home. If there's a heaven, son, she ain't in it.
The top 5 kickers in fantasy are as follows. With 41 points, Jake Elliott, selected in the 14th round by Highlander at number 1. Number 2, Jake Moody with 40 points. He was collected via free agency by Ricky O. With 39 points, at number 3 is Brandon Aubrey, picked up on waivers by Jokes on You. With 37 points, at spot number 4 is Brett Mayer, who is still in the player pool for the Indianapolis Colts. And with 36 points, at number 5, Tyler Bass, collected in the 14th round by the Toronto Bundy. And then eventually, when you scroll down far enough, not 10th, not 11th, not 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, or 20th, but spot 21, if you squint your eyes and kind of hold the papers at an angle, you'll see that Justin Tucker is at spot 21 with 21 total points. He, of course, was selected in the 3rd round by Acknowledge Me. I think we should have a discussion about crime and punishment, the evil things that people do and what should be done to them for those evil deeds. There was a discussion in the chat about Ed being nonchalant about the league and Ed, not really caring. And I think Eric used the verbiage of him using the league as toilet paper. Everything that Ed is doing is self-inflicted. Everything that Ed is doing is hurting Ed. I don't think it's hurting anyone else. As opposed to Pedro, who in 2018 didn't even show up to the championship game. Pedro should not be the arbiter of fantasy integrity. I'm sorry. That's just not going to happen. Not on my watch. Pedro did show up to the chip last year. And it's terrible enough when you can give somebody credit for showing up to a championship game because they didn't show up to their previous game. Ed would never do that. And I'm not here shooting Ed any bail, but Ed would never not show up to a championship game. So all this talk about Pedro, about taking the league seriously, when Pedro's done things that have hurt other teams. He literally handed Alvin Kamara, who's back this week, he literally handed Alvin Kamara to Eric with a red bow wrapped around his fucking cock. And Christmas night, or Christmas Eve, whatever day it was, Alvin Kamara exploded with 6 touchdowns. That completely screwed Paul over. Of course, but that didn't stop Paul from defending the whole situation and confronting me as if I'm the person, as if I'm the shithead because, this league is so fucking, upside down that somebody like Pedro could commit such a, such a soulless act of fantasy transactions and it not be looked at as corrupt because all of these moves, whether you pick up a kicker in the 3rd round, whether you draft someone to somebody that you're cool with, it all stems from playing in other leagues and even worse for Ed. Now, this is the most egregious thing that Ed has done throughout all of this. It's not picking Justin Tucker in the 3rd round. It's not even, throwing these fake trade proposals to people. And I know that we did make a trade and I think it was a very fair trade. And if it wasn't a fair trade, then obviously I think it would have gotten vetoed. Somebody would have said something, but it was pretty fair. The worst thing that Ed has done was admit that he doesn't care because we do not play for money. Now, that's what I accused Pedro of for years. I accused Pedro of making nonchalant trades and no-showing to games because he didn't care, right? Because we don't play for any monetary incentives. That's what's at the core of all of these terrible deeds. It's just not giving a fuck because you probably have all these other players that you're playing against in other leagues. If we were taking the topic of kicking people out of the league seriously, then I think Hensel would have been out of the league years ago. Hensel would have been gone years ago, and he knows that. Joe would have been gone years ago, and he knows that, right? Pedro should have been gone at some point, but nobody took it seriously. But it seems now that Pedro's taking the matter a bit seriously, and that's good. That's okay. I'm not here advocating that anybody should be kicked out of the league. I don't think Ed should be kicked out of the league because what Ed did was just stab himself in the chest. That's all he really did. I mean, it's an easy reference to all this stuff is always The Dark Knight, because The Dark Knight it's the most commercial and the most palatable example of the hero's journey. You have the rise, the fall, the mentorship, and facing adversity. There's so many moments in that whole trilogy where you can attribute it to fantasy. And Ed is he's in that moment after Batman got his ass whipped by Bane, and Bane has him down in the lair with the whole, with the whole well or whatever the fuck it's supposed to symbolize. But he has him there on the bed, and that one specific line that Bane says to Batman, he says, "When you have truly understood the depth of your failure, then we will fulfill Ra's al Ghul's destiny." Ed still hasn't understood quite how much of a fucking failure this season has been for him and will be for him, right? Because it doesn't even begin. I can't even begin to describe it to you just by telling you that Justin Tucker is the 21st kicker. Because if you look at the third round selection so far, I think Travis Kelce has 20 points in total, so Justin Tucker technically has more points than him. But after 8, 9, 12, 13 weeks, those round 3 selections are going to eclipse whatever Justin Tucker does. And, kickers are kickers, and they can have 18-point weeks out of nowhere, and he can jump up in the standings. But he will not understand how much of a failure this season was until the very last week of the season. You don't draft a kicker in the third round, but if you draft a kicker in the third round, then you fucked yourself over. We basically skipped a draft pick and moved on to the next pick. I don't think Ed should be eliminated. Ed cares very much about this league, but the problem is that Ed was willing to be so petty, and he was trying to be so cute, that what he ended up was shooting himself in his own fucking foot. And we can't necessarily say that Ed is losing all of these, he's lost all 3 of these games because of the draft pick. That's not what it was. I mean, I think Jay had mentioned that a couple people had good performances against him, but watch how this is going to extrapolate. Watch what's gonna happen over the next 5 to 6 weeks. You're going to see that hole, and it's going to be exposed. But again, Pedro can't be the person that's marching for fantasy integrity when Pedro hasn't been in good standing with this league for 1,000 days straight. It hasn't happened yet. As much shit as, and you know what? I think this is a product of Andy winning championships, because Andy winning 2 championships in a row and winning 1 just 2 years removed from that, I think what it did is sent a message to the rest of the league that, first of all, anybody can do it. Anybody can do it. You don't even have to put your mind to it. Anyone can do it if Andy did it. because 7 years ago, Andy was asking me who won in the again, and you did say that, Andy. You did say it. Just because you don't remember it doesn't mean you didn't say it. I remember, all right? I remember everything, you fucking dick. Again? If Andy, a guy who didn't give a shit about the league, didn't even know who was participating in the championships, and now, throws stats around and says, oh, I'm the last 3 of the last whatever the fuck. Now all of a sudden he's Mel Kiper. Now all of a sudden Andy is, he's a statistician. Now he cares because he's winning. It's very convenient, but whatever. He cares because he's winning. And I think now that Andy's won, it's making everybody take a closer look at this thing. And we should all be embarrassed if Andy wins another championship. But of course, he's not going to win another championship, at least not this year. Andy's, he's riding too close to the sun. And when you're riding so close to the sun in uncharted territory, we're just going to watch and wait for you to fail. That's all we're doing. We're just watching and waiting for you to fail. And then by the end of the season, I can just say, ha! Now we're tied. You see how that works, Andy? You see how that works? You're 1, 2, you're 3, not 4, not 5, all this stuff. What's more likely to happen, and now this has just turned into just a complete rant, I guess. It started off with Ed, went to Pedro, and now we're on to Andy, but who gives a shit? You're 1, not 2, not 3. What's more likely to happen is that you won't win this year. And then when you don't win this year, you just know what I'm going to say. You know what I'm going to say to you, Andy. But back to Ed. The punishment that Ed has to bear will be his own season. Am I saying that Ed is eliminated? No, I'm not saying that, because Ed is very ambitious in his trading. Though the danger with Ed would be if in 4 to 5 weeks, Ed has 1 win, and at that point you can kind of just, close everything out. The danger with Ed would be that very same ambition. The willingness to make trades and then to do something that would be akin to what Pedro did with Alvin Kamara. To just give someone a player, maybe giving Paul Mike Evans just as a gift. Just giving him, then we should start to consider, should this be vetoed? Because he doesn't care about the season anymore. Because that would be the conclusion, right? If somebody tells you that I don't care about this league, or I don't care as much because we should play for money, you can then conclude if they have 1 win in 8 weeks that they would make a chaotic trade that, isn't balanced, doesn't really make any sense, but all they really want to do is make waves. So that's the only thing that we have to consider with Ed, but there's no reason why there should be a conversation about Ed being kicked out of this league, right? This is not as big an offense as what was done several years ago. And Pedro shouldn't be the fucking arbiter of fantasy integrity. That was a very, very long rant, but this is your week 3 recap. Bundy here, you there. Oh, I'm hurt. I'm so hurt. The only thing more annoying than, losing your number 1 pick, and your number 1 pick, not playing for the past 2 weeks, and it's under consideration still if he's even going to play for week 4. I believe the Chargers have a bye in week 5, so they're probably saving Austin Eckler. The only thing worse than that is Austin Eckler constantly giving you this vague update on his weekly podcast. He has a podcast with Yahoo Sports that he does with some other guy, and every week it's like, well, us football players, we're people too, so I know you guys want me to get there on the field, but and he's vague about all the shit, which of course he has to be. He's not gonna candidly say, yes, I'm going to play this week. To Austin Eckler's credit, he's very much into fantasy, but it's so fucking annoying to hear him say these things and then he doesn't show up. Just say you're fucking injured. Just say, no, I'm not going to show up, guys. Saquon Barkley, if he had a podcast right now, he would be saying, guys, you don't expect me to suit up until week 6 or week 5, whenever the fuck it is. But there's nothing more annoying than that. So I lose to Cakewalk Rape, 132 to 80. I'm very happy with Josh Allen. I'm very happy with my Ja'Marr Chase trade that I did with Ed, because it's Ja'Marr Chase. Why wouldn't I want the second wide receiver off the board a month within the draft? That's another thing that Ed doesn't realize here. This is the depth of your failure. When you have truly understood the depth of your failure. You know what I want? If anyone's listened to this installment, I want you to leave a voice note and to drop Ed a voice note. Ed, when you have truly understood the depth of your failure, then we will prepare as a winner's destiny. That's another marker. That's another thing that can indicate how bad of a season this is for Ed. If Ja'Marr Chase ends up having the season that we all know he ends up having and Mike Evans gets hurt. But I wish you all the luck in the world, Ed. As I said, I make trades hoping that they are successful for you. So if Mike Evans gets a touchdown, I don't go, damn it! God damn it! Because then I wouldn't have made the trade. I shouldn't have made the trade. And that's what you'll find yourself doing for the weeks to come, especially when Ja'Marr Chase does it this week. So anyway, I'm talking too much. Jalen Hurts with 21 points. Of course, Christian McCaffrey, who should not have been on Ed's team, on Eric's team, with 17 points. 5 disappointing points from Ramondre Stevenson. And look, I didn't lose because I don't have Austin Eckler. Nobody was going to beat Eric this week, as of course he walks away with the Kirk Cameron Award for Fantasy Excellence. 32 fucking points from his defense. 32 fucking points from the Buffalo Bills defense. So when you score over 30 points from your defense, you really aren't gonna fucking lose to anyone. So congratulations to Ewok Rape, who is 3-0 at the moment. And another thing that's fucking me over are my selection of defenses. Last week, what did I get? A -4 from the Giants. And this week, I get a -7 from the Jaguars. All of a sudden, the Houston offense just goes off, just like the Arizona offense went off last week. And that ended up fucking me in the ass. Because at this point, all you can really hope to do is score points. I'm in the 80s. That's decent. You'd love to crack the 90s or the 100s, but at least I'm not in the 60s or the 50s, right? The very next game here is 117-86. Joilicus Maximus losing to Jokes on You, who got almost nothing from Joe Burrow, who shows up at the last minute. 26 points from Kenneth Walker, 16 from Jerome Ford. Jerome Ford may end up being this year's Ramondre Stevenson for me, because I put Ramondre Stevenson on the bench way too early in the season. Then I think Ed picked him up, and this year I don't know. Who would have foreseen Nick Chubb breaking his fucking knee, and now Jerome Ford is, he's gonna be the guy to get the load. So I drafted Jerome Ford. I think he was my last pick. Let me see. God damn it. It's gonna happen all over again this fucking year for me. Yeah, he was the my 15th round pick was Jerome Ford, 142nd pick in the draft. And there you go, 16 points for Pato, 29 points for Davante Adams, who's having his breakout year that we all knew he would. Not really a breakout year. I mean it's Davante Adams, but 7 measly points from Josh Jacobs, who at the very least, week 1 he gets 6 points, week 2 he's got 5, week 3 7 fantasy points for Josh Jacobs. But if you watch any of the Raider games, it doesn't look like the same offensive system. It just doesn't look like it's benefiting Josh Jacobs. So I will stand on the very same comment that I made last week when I said that Pedro should trade Josh Jacobs, at least while he's still healthy, at the very least, unless he gets hurt, and we really don't want that to happen. A surprise on Pedro's bench here as he benches James Conner, a man that he has been in a very intimate relationship with. James Conner getting 16 points for a second consecutive week. Jalen Waddle, who was injured and didn't get to participate in that massacre over in Miami, And over on the other side, you had 25 points from Kirk Cousins. He surprisingly started Kirk Cousins over Deshaun Watson, who scored 20, so I guess that was a good decision for Joe. And Derrick Henry, who's either injured or maybe he's... I don't know what's happening with Derrick Henry, but he only got 11 carries this last week with 20 yards and 2 fantasy points. Let's see, Tyler Algier did nothing. Yeah, the rest of Joe's team did not show up. So as a result, he is now 0-3, and Joke's on You is 2-1. J-Ray losing 80 points to 121 to Rolo Thomas C. 38 points from Raheem Mostert. As I said, anyone who lost this week, me included, you are absolved of your failure. The failure that Joe feels, the failure that Ed feels, the failure that I feel for, at least I have half a win. I have 0.5 victories at the very least. I'm not as bad as you guys, but still we're in the same league with each other. The failure that we all feel is absolved because of the collective failure of the Denver Broncos. How much did the Denver Broncos, God, this is going to be a hell of a detour here, but it has to be done. What's the limit on negative points? Like what's the most you can get? Let's see. Denver Broncos. Come on, where are you? Don't tell me somebody. See, I went directly to the player pool. -4. Are you kidding me? How did the Denver Broncos score -4 points and they gave up 70, and the Jaguars gave up how many points for me and they got -7? Kamish, please explain this to me. Explain to me how this works. How do I get -7 points and these motherfuckers have -4 points and they gave up 70? Anyway, we're gonna move along from that. Alexander Madison received that racist comment from a fan. What was it, over Twitter? I was so, I saw that story from a distance, but I didn't really pay much attention to it. He scored 12 points, so at least he redeemed himself a bit there. Bijan Robinson, is it time to have a conversation about, now, of course, he is a talent on the field, without a doubt. He's gonna be a thing. Is it too early to maybe say that Bijan Robinson wasn't worth picking up in the very first round? Now, I know thousands of people picked him up with their very first selection, but so far, 13 points week 1, 16 week 2, 5 this week. Of course, he got 124 yards last week, but 10 carries, 33 yards, 4 catches. Is this the sort of production that you're going to get from him? When is he going to hit his first, his first 25 points, his first 30 points? It's got to happen. If you select a guy in the very first round, he's got to give you 20. I mean, Austin Eckler, with all his fucking vague bullshit on his podcast, at least gave me 21 points. And this guy hasn't even gotten 20. So, Paul, let's, Let's start to think about these things. AJ Brown with 13 points. Okay, so over on the other side, you had an interesting movement where Jay decided to sit Justin Fields and play Jared Goff. Now, it worked out in his advantage because Jared Goff scored 17 points and Justin Fields. But I just want to say that at this point, that was week 3. In week 3, we were at the point where Jay was so confident in making his judgments of everyone else's keepers, including mine, making his comments about keepers. And week 3, it's not even a month into the season, and he's already playing the matchup game because he's starting him this week. Justin Fields is going up against the worst defense against quarterbacks. I don't know who that is, but I'll find out later. He's playing against the worst defense against quarterbacks, but and Jared Goff's playing on Thursday, so I guess maybe he doesn't want to play him too early. But anyway, we're not so far removed from the draft recaps, and look what Jay's doing now. Kyle Pitts is he's in the absolute pits. He's got 4 points. He just hasn't been doing shit this year. Calvin Ridley, who started off the season with a bang, has now scored 7 points over the last 2 weeks. And J-Ray lost. Okay, so moving on to Highlander Part the Highlander trilogy, whatever the fuck your name is, 128 points, defeating Ricky O, who is no longer undefeated. 24 points by Patrick Mahomes, 6 points by Andy. He got no running backs. No running backs. When is Aaron Jones coming back? Is Aaron Jones playing the Chicago Bears every week? These are the questions that Andy has to answer. Yeah. He's doing his thing right now. He's got the most points. He's 3-0. He's won 2 straight championships. But as I said, he's riding very close to the sun. No one's ever done this, right? What's more likely is that someone else is going to win the championship. The odds on you winning the championship it's very off, right? I wouldn't bet on you because no one's done it before. You get it, Andy? It's not a personal stab against you. It's just a general assessment of what happens in this league. And the last time somebody won 2 in a row, I don't know where Jay placed. I don't even know if he made the playoffs that year, but he didn't fucking win, right? And you have a little hole here since you have no running backs whatsoever. You're holding on to a prayer here with this Kyron Williams, right? You're holding on to something there with the Rams, but as soon as Cooper Kupp comes back, they'll never run the ball again. It's just never going to happen again. As soon as Cooper Kupp touches the field, they will stop running the ball altogether. Keenan Allen with 26 points, and he's riding high. But Keenan Allen soon will get hurt. Soon will get hurt just like Mike Williams, and then Austin Eckler gets back, and then it's 40 carries every game for Austin Eckler. And what else here is to mention? Nothing here really to mention. Tyreek Hill, of course, did what he had to do in that massacre of a game. And on the other side, you had 28 points by Lamar Jackson, who finally performing like the Lamar Jackson of old. James Cook, who surprisingly has been a bright spot for Orlando. I wasn't considering James Cook at all, of course, knowing that I was going to pick up Josh Allen. I didn't want the running back as well, but 15 points in week 2 and 10 points in week number 3, 123 yards last week and 98 this week. So good things happening with James Cook. DeAndre Swift has taken the place of Saquon Barkley as Orlando's RB1, but all in all, it was not enough to beat Highlander Part 3. Plathanos defeating Acknowledge Me. I'm even forgetting Ed's name. We're not acknowledging him anymore. Defeating Acknowledge Me 82-76. This was, this game was kind of a wash here. Nothing interesting really happening. 20 points for Brock Purdy. Ed picking up Jordan Love. It's interesting. That's the mark of every championship team. Is having 3 quarterbacks. Look back into the papers, dig, and find out how many people have won championships with 3 quarterbacks. I don't get it. I don't understand it. Jahmyr Gibbs hasn't lived up to the hype just yet. And Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson have been rendered useless the minute Aaron Rodgers got injured. 1 point for Breece Hall and 4 points for Garrett Wilson. I sat Delvin Cook this week, and I think I'll be sitting Delvin Cook for the next few weeks coming. Mike Evans, of course, with his 12 points. I think he got a late touchdown in that game. Sam Laporta with 14 points. He is performing like one of the better tight ends at tight end number 2, but let's see if that's going to stick for the duration of the season. And 6 points for Justin Tucker. Over on the other side, you had Trevor Lawrence, who's been struggling a bit over the past. Well, he's been struggling for the last 3 weeks. 17, 8 points, 14 points. So he hasn't quite cracked that 20-point seal yet. Tony Pollard with 12 points, and Hensel, of course, getting great production from the Eagles defense. So Hensel moves to a record of 1-1-1, and Ed goes to a record of 0-3. Over to the divisions. Highlander 3-0, Rolo Tomassi 2-1, Ricky O 2-1, J Ray 1-2, Joel at the bottom of the division, as he normally is at the bottom of every division, at 0-3. And wait just a second, I gotta eat a grape. NWO division, yeah, just like I guessed, yeah. Cakewalk Rape at top of that with 3-0. Jokes on You at 2-1. Plathanos 1-1-1. The Toronto Bundy 0-2-1. And Acknowledge Me at 0-3. The top 5 scorers of the league are as follows: Highlander Part 3, 342. Ewok Rape 313. 302 Rolo Thomasy 268. J Ray and Ricky O with 267. You know, it's how the cookie crumbles. I'm not panicking just yet. Obviously I'm not panicking because I'm facing Ed, and I'm not saying that I'm facing Ed because I have a great history against Ed. Ed is statistically the worst team in the league with 190 points. He still hasn't scored over 200 points. Do I like my chances? I love my chances against Ed, and I love my chances even more if Austin Eckler would just play. At the moment, he's listed as questionable and projected to get 14 points, but I'm planning on him not playing. They're just going to sit him, and he'll be back week 6, and hopefully by then I'll have one victory, and I think I'll get a victory this week because Ed's all over the place. So that's Acknowledge Me versus the Toronto Bundy. Ewok Rape going up against Big Papa J Ray. There, I said it because it just sounds silly, just J Ray. Right? I don't know. I'll flip it somehow, Jason. I'll flip it in a way that turns it into kind of an insult against you, because that's the only way this whole dynamic works. I insult you, you sit there and take it. Joelicus Maximus going up against Highlander Part 3. It's very likely that Highlander is going to move on to 4-0, but this could be a trap game. Who knows? This could be a trap game, for we all know. Jokes on You going up against Plathanos. Plathanos projected to get 81 points. Jokes on You with 98 points. And Rolo Thomasy up against Ricky O to end the week 4. I didn't even say week 4. I just went off to read them. The week 4 matchups. Guys, there it is. There it is. We have to consider the crime and punishment of certain situations. Is someone committing a fantasy faux pas? Yes or no? But is this faux pas hurting them, or is it hurting the rest of the league? If it hurts them, then they just have to bear the consequence of their record. If it hurts the rest of the league, then we should consider certain disciplinary action or kicking them out of the league. But chances are no one will ever get kicked out of the league. And I also want to say this. I also want to say that Pedro's proposal of adding 1 or 2 teams to the league is terrible. Like, never. That's so radical. That's like defunding the police. Like, that's how radical that feels to me. Like, when liberals are just like, listen, the police brutality has gotten to the point that, let's just defund the police. Let's just, look, I'm all in favor of Andy losing his job. I'm okay with Andy losing his job. But in fantasy, we can't go so radical by adding 1 or 2 teams. The amount of hoarding that would take place if first of all, it doesn't make sense because I don't think you can have an odd number of teams. So you would have to add 2 teams. The amount of hoarding that would take place would the aroma alone would kill you. Ed has 3 quarterbacks now, and that's with 10 teams. How many quarterbacks do you think he's going to have? His entire bench is going to be filled with quarterbacks. No, I don't want 2 more teams. Fuck that. No. Fuck you, Pedro. So, as always, may your quarterbacks get hurt before they leave the locker room. May your running backs pull their hamstrings. And may your wide receivers get arrested for marijuana possession. Go fuck yourselves.